She sent him off to a rundown motel, thinking that was the end of it. But by morning, she learned the truth: he owned the entire hotel. The lobby of the Sterling Heights Hotel in Santa Monica was buzzing with life. It was a Friday night, and the air was thick with the energy of travelers checking in, bellhops weaving through the crowd with luggage carts, and conversations bouncing off the polished marble floors. This was no ordinary hotel. Its luxury was undeniable. Massive palm trees lined the grand entrance, and in the center of the ceiling hung a chandelier that cost more than most people's homes. Behind the front desk stood Rachel. In her mid-30s, she carried herself with confidence, though the exhaustion of a grueling 12-hour shift was starting to show. All day, she had dealt with demanding guests, last-minute booking changes, and irate callers claiming their reservations had mysteriously vanished. Now, as the night stretched on, she had no patience left for surprises. What had started as a crisp, professional uniform that morning was now creased from the long hours, and her temper was wearing just as thin. The hotel doors swung open once more, and a man stepped inside. At first glance, he was easy to overlook: faded jeans, worn-out sneakers, and a hoodie that had clearly seen better days. He carried no suitcase, only a leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder. He paused, scanning the lobby, as if searching for something, or someone. No one paid him much attention. The guests carried on with their conversations, and the staff moved with purpose. He looked like just another weary traveler hoping for a last-minute room. But there was something about him. His relaxed posture did not match the nervous energy of most late-night walk-ins. He moved with a quiet certainty, as if the chaos around him did not matter. Rachel noticed him, too, but not because of his confidence. His disheveled look set off her instincts immediately. She barely concealed a sigh as he approached the desk. Late-night walk-ins were almost always trouble. Either they were looking to negotiate a better rate, or they were desperate and unwilling to take no for an answer. And judging by this man's appearance, she thought she knew exactly which category he fell into. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady and unhurried. "I would like to book a room for the night, please." Rachel forced a polite smile, the kind that did not quite reach her eyes. "Unfortunately, we are fully booked tonight, sir," she said, her tone professional but firm. She tapped a few keys on her keyboard, feigning confirmation of what she already knew. The man did not react right away. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her in a way that made her shift uncomfortably. "Fully booked," he repeated, his voice calm. "Not a single room available?" Rachel straightened, already sensing the argument he was about to make. "That is correct," she replied. "We have had a very busy night, and all our rooms are occupied." She gestured toward the bustling lobby to emphasize her point. "There is a motel a few blocks away, they might have availability." For a moment, she thought she saw the corner of his mouth twitch in amusement, but if it was there, it vanished just as quickly. Instead, he offered a faint smile, one that did not quite reach his eyes. He leaned slightly on the counter, meeting her gaze. "No cancellations? No options at all?" His voice held no frustration, just quiet curiosity. Rachel felt her irritation spike. Why could he not just take her answer and leave? "Sir," she said, her tone sharper now, "I do not think this is the right place for you." Her voice took on a sharper, more dismissive edge. "Like I said, there is a motel nearby. They will probably have something that fits your situation." Her gaze flicked over his worn hoodie and jeans, the meaning behind her words unmistakable. This was not the kind of place for someone like him. The man straightened, his face unreadable now. For a second, Rachel thought he might argue, but instead, he just gave a small nod and stepped away from the counter. "Thank you for your time," he said evenly before turning on his heel. Rachel expected him to leave. Instead, he made his way toward the seating area, choosing a chair in the corner with a clear view of the front desk. He sat there, relaxed, hands resting on the armrests as he watched the room unfold around him. She tried to ignore him as she continued her work, but every so often, she found her eyes drifting back to him. What was he doing? Why had he not left? A part of her dismissed it. She had enough to worry about without overanalyzing some stranger. But the way he sat there, silent, observing, made her uneasy in a way she could not quite explain. She pushed the thought aside. He was probably just another guest who did not know when to quit. Minutes turned into an hour, and still, he had not moved. Rachel could feel his presence, even when she was not looking. He was not staring at her outright, but every time she glanced over, his eyes were scanning the lobby before landing back on her. She told herself it was nothing. Just another stubborn guest who did not like being told no. But with each passing minute, her irritation grew. By the time the clock struck 11, the lobby had settled. The rush of check-ins had slowed, and Rachel could finally breathe a little easier. Her shift was nearing its end, and the thought of unwinding at home with a glass of wine was the only thing keeping her sane. Then, just as she started to relax, his voice cut through the quiet. "Excuse me." Rachel nearly jumped. She looked up to see him standing at the desk again, his expression calm, unreadable as ever. She inhaled sharply, pushing back her frustration as she turned to face him. "Yes?" she asked, her voice tighter than before. She did not even bother pretending to be polite this time. "I apologize for bothering you again," he said, his tone smooth and composed. "But I could not help noticing that a few guests have checked in just now. Are you sure there is no room available?" Rachel clenched her jaw. "Sir, I have already explained this to you," she said, crossing her arms. "Those guests had reservations. That is why they got rooms. I do not know what else to tell you." He nodded, seemingly unaffected by her irritation. "I see," he said thoughtfully. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "And if I wanted to make a reservation for tomorrow night, would that be possible?" Rachel blinked, caught off guard. "Tomorrow?" she repeated. "Yes," he said. "Is there availability tomorrow?" Her fingers moved over the keyboard as she checked the system, a frown tugging at her lips. "We have rooms available tomorrow," she admitted. "But I am not sure what difference that makes for you." "Tonight, it makes no difference," he said with a small smile. "But it is good to know." Rachel felt her irritation spike. Something about his tone, calm, measured, felt almost smug, though she could not put her finger on why. "Look, I do not have time for this," she snapped, her voice rising slightly. "If you do not have a reservation and you cannot afford to stay here, then maybe you should stop wasting both our time and head over to that motel I mentioned." Rachel's words hung in the air, sharp and final. The man's expression remained unchanged, but something in his eyes shifted, just slightly. He gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, then stepped back from the desk. "Understood," he said simply. Without another word, he returned to his seat in the corner of the lobby, his posture as composed as before. Rachel felt a fleeting flicker of guilt, but she pushed it down immediately. He was not her problem. She had done her job. That was that. Or at least, it should have been. Yet, even as she turned her focus back to her work, she could not shake the strange unease creeping into her thoughts. The way he sat there, still, quiet, completely unbothered, made her feel like she had missed something important. Minutes blurred into hours, and while Rachel busied herself with her usual tasks, the man in the corner remained. He was not disruptive. In fact, he barely moved. He just sat there, watching, not in a way that felt aggressive or intrusive, but with the calm patience of someone who was simply waiting. Every so often, his gaze drifted toward the front desk, studying the movements of the staff, the interactions, the small moments that most guests never noticed. Rachel tried to convince herself it did not matter. People lingered in the lobby all the time, waiting for rides, meeting friends, passing the time. But this man was different. He was not scrolling through his phone or flipping through a magazine. He was observing. At one point, Rachel caught him watching as a young bellhop struggled with an overloaded luggage cart. To her surprise, the man stood, walked over, and, without a word, adjusted the placement of the bags, showing the bellhop how to better distribute the weight. The younger worker gave him a grateful smile, nodding in thanks. Rachel frowned. What was his angle? She kept an eye on him as the night continued. He seemed to take interest in the details most guests overlooked, the concierge calming an irate couple demanding an upgrade, the cleaning staff swiftly wiping away fingerprints from the glass doors. He even noticed her, snapping at a coworker who had only asked a simple question about the reservation system. Every now and then, he would glance her way, his expression unreadable. Not angry. Not smug. Just thoughtful. As if he were piecing together a puzzle. By the time midnight rolled around, he finally stood. He adjusted the strap of his leather bag and made his way toward the exit. Rachel exhaled, relieved. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said, his voice low and deliberate. Rachel barely looked up from her screen. "Have a good night," she muttered, distracted. She expected that to be the last of him. But just before stepping through the revolving doors, he paused. Turning back, he let his eyes roam across the lobby one final time, the polished floors, the glowing chandelier, the staff working seamlessly in the background. Then, his gaze settled on Rachel. For the briefest moment, he smiled. A faint, knowing smile. And then he was gone. Rachel felt an odd sense of relief. But at the same time, something about the encounter left a tension in her chest she could not quite explain. Little did she know, the events of that night were far from over. The next morning, the Sterling Heights hotel staff gathered in the conference room for an unexpected team meeting. Rachel yawned as she entered, still groggy from her late shift. Meetings like this were rarely anything exciting, usually just updates on hotel policies or reminders to push premium services. She slumped into a chair toward the back, scrolling through her phone while waiting for it to start. But the room had a different energy today. A quiet buzz of curiosity rippled through the staff. People whispered about a big announcement, though no one seemed to know exactly what it was. Even the senior employees sat up a little straighter, their expressions more alert than usual. Something was definitely different. The door opened, and the general manager, Mr. Calloway, strode in. His usual confident demeanor seemed even more pronounced today. But it was not just him. Rachel's stomach dropped. Walking in beside him, standing tall and composed, was the man from last night. Only this time, there was no hoodie, no faded jeans. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, the kind that screamed importance. And he was looking right at her. "Good morning, everyone," he said. Mr. Calloway began, his voice bright and confident. "I hope you are all doing well. We have a very special guest with us today, someone who has taken a great interest in the operations of this hotel." Rachel's stomach twisted. Was this about last night? Had the man come back to lodge a complaint about her? Her heart pounded as she sank lower into her chair. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Elon Musk," Calloway announced, grinning. "The new owner of Sterling Heights Hotel." The room fell deathly silent. Every eye turned toward the man Rachel had dismissed without a second thought the night before. He gave a small nod, his face calm, wearing the same unreadable expression as the previous evening. Rachel felt the air rush out of her lungs. Elon Musk. She had humiliated Elon Musk. Her mind reeled, playing back the events of last night with horrifying clarity. She had looked him up and down, sent him off like some cheap traveler who did not belong. And now, he stood before them all as their boss. Elon stepped forward, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. "I have always believed that the heart of any business is its people," he began, his tone measured, thoughtful. "That is why I like to see things for myself, without any filters or special treatment." Rachel swallowed hard, heat rising in her face. "Last night," Elon continued, I had the opportunity to observe how this hotel operates. From the teamwork of the bellhops to the patience of the concierge staff, I saw a lot to admire. He paused, letting his words settle over the room. Then, his gaze shifted. Straight to Rachel. She felt the weight of it press into her, her breath hitching in her throat. But, he went on, I also saw moments that reminded me why kindness and attention to detail are everything in the hospitality industry. Rachel's stomach clenched. He never said her name. Never singled her out. But the meaning behind his words was crystal clear. Silence stretched between them. The tension in the room thickened, but Elon was not here to humiliate anyone. His voice remained steady, his words intentional, not harsh, not cruel, but firm. In a place like this, where people expect the best, he continued, how we treat them defines their experience. And sometimes, even the smallest gestures, a smile, a bit of patience, can make all the difference. His eyes swept across the room, softening slightly. I want to be clear, this is not about blame. It is about growth. Every person here plays a role in this hotel's success. I would not be here if I did not believe in its potential. And in all of you. There was a quiet murmur of agreement from the staff, but Rachel remained frozen. She could not stop replaying her own voice from the night before. The way she had dismissed him. The clipped, condescending tone. The assumption that he was beneath this place. It was all so obvious now. So avoidable. Her skin burned with humiliation. Elon's voice pulled her back. Starting today, I will be working closely with management to ensure that our team has everything it needs to succeed. That means training, support, and yes, accountability. He paused, then added, we owe it to ourselves, and our guests, to set the highest standards. Polite applause rippled through the room as the meeting came to an end. Elon gave a small nod of thanks before stepping back. The staff began to rise, some whispering excitedly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The energy in the room buzzed with realization. Rachel, however, could not move. Her legs felt like lead, her hands clammy against the table. She forced herself to breathe, to gather her thoughts. Just as she worked up the courage to stand, she felt a presence beside her. Looking up, Rachel saw Elon standing there. Her heart nearly stopped. Rachel, isn't it? He asked, his voice calm yet direct. She swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how dry her mouth was. Why yes, sir, she managed, barely above a whisper. He regarded her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, a genuine, almost reassuring smile. I know yesterday was a long day for you, he said. It is not easy being on the front lines when things get busy. But remember, every interaction counts. People notice how they are treated, even when you think no one is watching. Rachel nodded quickly, struggling to find the right words. I understand, she stammered. And I am so sorry about. Elon raised a hand, stopping her gently. No need to apologize, he said. Just learn from it. That is all I ask. With that, he gave her a small nod and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The meeting, the revelation, his words, it all swirled in her mind like a storm. For the first time in her career, Rachel truly understood the weight of her actions. The way a single moment, a single decision, could ripple outward. And in that moment, she made a silent promise, to do better. Not just for the guests, but for herself. As Rachel walked out of the conference room, she carried a mix of emotions, embarrassment, guilt, but also a spark of determination. Elon's words echoed in her mind. Not as a reprimand, but as a lesson. She realized that her behavior, though fueled by exhaustion, was not excusable. Every person who walked through those hotel doors deserved kindness, no matter what they looked like, no matter what assumptions she might have. Over the next few weeks, Rachel made a change. She greeted every guest with a genuine smile, even when she was tired. She listened instead of making snap judgments. And soon, she saw the difference. Guests responded warmly. Her colleagues relied on her more, trusting her patience and leadership. And the job that once felt like an exhausting grind? It now held a renewed sense of purpose. The story of the mysterious owner became a quiet legend among the staff. No one ever knew when Elon might return, but the possibility kept everyone on their toes. For Rachel, though, it was never about the fear of being watched. It was about the kind of person she wanted to be. She no longer saw her job as just a paycheck, but as an opportunity to make small, meaningful differences in people's lives. The lesson she learned that day was simple yet profound. Never underestimate the value of kindness. And never judge someone by their appearance. You never know who you are talking to, or how much your words might matter. And so, as Rachel went on to become a pillar of excellence at Sterling Heights, the moral of her story became clear. It costs nothing to be kind. But the rewards? They can change everything.